So first I want to say thank you, Cookie, for inviting me here to be a part of this panel that I would have been happy to just to be sitting out in the audience listening to you. But thank you. But I guess one of the first questions that I guess it could really be a conclusion question. It can really be a question that we could ask at the end. But I thought it would, for me, I thought it would be good to start with because the title of the exhibition is Where Do We Go From Here? So I know that with you, Nikki Finney, as well as Drew, and I've read your book, and I'm going to talk about your book a little bit more. To start with that question, where do we go from here? In response to a lot of the, I guess, issues and questions and ideas or thoughts that I guess that the exhibition brings up, issues that are happening culturally, I guess, within the African American community, and just in general with your own work and looking at and trying to make sense of where do we go from here, from this point forward. And for me, in terms of my last question, I'm going to ask, just to give you a heads up, that's going to be my last question as well, all right? So we'll have an evolution, all right? So I'll start with you.
With me?
I'm going to start with yeah, well, since you said for me, yes, I'll start with you. All right. And then Nikki, and then Drew.
Oh, okay.
All right.
When I birthed the idea of All That We Carry, I had been so moved by Dr. Tiya Miles' book, All That She Carried. And I took it to a more psychic, spiritual level for myself, thinking, you know, my family does not have a sack. We don't have pieces of things, but we have drama and trauma and joy and recipes and all of those things. And as a Black woman, the last 3 or 4 years have been incredibly intense and intense. And so I am carrying a lot of joy and anger and sadness, but also a tremendous need to create. It wakes me up at night. I'm not a writer, so I get out my fabric and my needles and I create something that speaks to or soothes what is my experience. I sometimes can't make I'm an art quilter and a doll maker, and I don't necessarily can't speak directly to, I could not make a George Floyd quilt. I could not do what I call any more tragedy porn. I wanted to do something that moved us to the next place. One of the shows that is currently touring that I did this last year was What Does Social Justice Look Like? And I said, you know, we all know what social injustice looks like. You know, we are all African Americans and we know that in our DNA. But what would it look like if we had full social justice? I live in the Charleston area and it's called the Holy City. What would it look like if Charleston really was a holy city resurrected in love and purpose and compassion? And so those are the kinds of things that I brought to this exhibit.
That you brought to this exhibit, and really in bringing it to the exhibit, you're really looking at that as an aspect of moving forward from that point in conversation. Absolutely. Visually. And it's interesting because listening to you talk, and I know you, I've known Cookie for years. Yeah, we exhibit, she always getting me to do things. But in listening to you talk, it's good because it's a good segue into Nikki Finney answering this same question. Because listening to you talk and knowing you could actually be one of the characters in Nikki Finney's writings, you know, in terms of the experience and forging forward and continuing to do that. And I'll talk about that even more later. So I'm going to, a good segue to lead to you in that same question. Where do we go from here?
Well, hello everyone, welcome. Hello, everyone up here. I'm so glad to be here. I was just telling Cookie that I haven't been back on Sumter High campus in about 50 years. So I'm having all kind of flashbacks. The gymnasium is still standing, the tennis court where I used to hold forth a little bit. So this is sacred soil in a way.
So this was a school, this is where you went to school?
This is a high school this is my high school.
Oh, wow, okay, all right.
Yeah, so I wasn't, and I'm having so many sort of emotional flashes because I was a black girl who was creative, very, 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 very quiet. My mother was home making pieces of art around us. There was a little place called the Hobby Hut where she would go get pictures that had, fill in the number and take the string. And she didn't trust herself enough to do original art, but she was creating all around me. And so I came up in her house. So she was doing that in the one room, and then my father would come home, just having gotten a number of college students out of jail for protesting and wanting the society to be better. I didn't know until I was about 20 that my father actually sued Sumter County library system so that me and my brother Chip and all of the black children in this town could go to the Carnegie Library.
Wow.
I didn't realize that he brought forth that suit, but after his death, I was cleaning out his office and I found that file. And I was like, he never told me that.
Wow,
But
that
he
needs to
knew
be a plaque. We need a plaque.
It was
there. Okay. All right.
he knew that I needed to be in the library. My mother was doing that at home, and before the court could decide that, they relented. And black children could go to the library system in here. So this town has I have a lot of emotion about growing up here, and I never thought I could become an artist, a poet, somebody who took justice and the things that happened around me and create something beautiful for the world. So I'm jumping around, but my response to where do we go from here really has to do with a Toni Morrison quote where she says, we've spent, and this is not to push against we always have to have a theme, right? But Morrison said to me when I was in my 20s, not to me, sorry. She said to the world, and I caught it as a ticker tape, we spend so much time reacting to racism and reacting to all those things that I saw my father reacting to in a necessary way, right? That we don't spend enough time making sweetgrass baskets into a pork pie hat. That's what he's doing. That's his generation taking what his grandmother taught him and then saying, well, what's my twist on this? How do I see sweetgrass into, and that's what's so beautiful about his work. And so I'm here because I wanted, and I still want, in this state of South Carolina, I want black girls to know they can be creative agents. And every time, I was here, and still, I see black people on the news for everything but creativity. And yet I know that's a lie. But I know that's the society that I live in, and that's the picture that we put out there. So back to your question that I'm not answering.
I think you're doing really good.
Where do we go from here?
Really good.
We keep making the things that give us strength and power and keeps the blood moving through our systems, and imagining a world that is not here right now. Imagining a world that we all need to live in to be the humanity that we say we are.
That's good. And yes, that deserves a clap, right? Yes. And what's interesting about that, because the saying to me is an iconic saying that we kind of relate to Martin Luther King in his writing, where do we go from here? And how you just resummed it and rephrased it and repackaged it, I think it says that it makes that statement so well. That one of the things that we should be doing is keep making or learning to make and moving forward sweetgrass basket hats. I'm gonna do that when I go home. All right, and doing those things. Well said. So, Lanham, and then we're gonna go to and then how do you respond, Dr. Lanham?
Well, first, gratitude,
Right.
right?
Right.
To all here assembled and to everyone who came out. It's an honor to be here. And that word maybe in forward here. I think before we go forward, we need to understand where we are.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
There's a little bit of an importance, or a lot of importance, in understanding stasis. I mean, and dandelions are before the wind then blows them. So we are a diasporic people who've been wind blown in many ways. And in spite of all those forces that would be against us, we've managed to sprout in those places and persist even as they try to get rid of us.
Right. Right.
And so a dandelion aspires to be the dandelion that it is. It has a deep root. Try to pull one up.
My dad used to make me do that in the yard. Yes.
But
That's
you know
not
what?
fun.
All it takes is this much of a dandelion tap.
Right.
And it comes back.
And it comes back. Yes.
So I think about it sometimes in that way, and I think about, where I come from in Edgefield County. And if a lot of you don't know where Edgefield County is, but I will tell you, as much as people would like to think that South Carolina comes out of the planter class in Charleston and Georgetown, is Edgefield and 10 governors
Come on.
who established the idea of the populist that we see today. So Pitchfork Ben Tillman,
Yes.
J. Strom Thurmond, that's out of Edgefield. But then out of Edgefield comes David Drake,
Yeah. Yeah.
who quite frankly is being fetishized right now in large museums. And those vessels, so the story of David Drake is that he created these vessels, this stoneware. Edgefield clay is some of the best in the world.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. But he created these vessels, but then David Drake wrote on these vessels poems.
Poetry.
Right? Not very many, maybe 20 that they found, but he wrote more than that.
Yeah. You know he did.
He wrote more than
You
that.
know he did. Come on.
But those vessels are now worth a lot. But what was carried and meant to be carried in those things from a utilitarian standpoint is nothing compared to what they carried forward.
Right,
This whole
right,
idea of
right.
words as protest. And Drake was planted where he was because he was planted where he was, but those words survived. So I'm hoping that as an Edgefieldian and somebody from a place that, was built to keep people where they are, but yet they flourished instead, that these wind-blown seeds are all over the place. That we understand that place, that sweet grass
Yeah.
that this brother does miracles with, it's old growth. It's old growth. So in thinking about those roots and thinking about how we go forward, I think for me, at least, a part of that as a writer is writing to that history, writing to that natural history, but then hopefully writing to where that takes us. So that's sort of where I am.
That's good.
Can I just
Yes. Go.
at one point?
Yeah.
Daughters of the
3.
Dust is all in this room and all in this conversation. Because the mother wants to keep the family on the Sea Island, Anton. She doesn't want the family to leave and go to New York because all of the history of the family that they know is on the Sea Island, in the food, in the shrimp, in the seagrass baskets. But the family, because we are in this performative world where we have to perform, purchase the art, push, we have to eat it up. Anton said, I'm staying at home. And I'm going to get grandmama's knowledge.
Right. Right.
And so I look at him and I keep talking about him because I'm full I'm full with the story that I am learning about him, and his art and what he's doing, and how there used to be 500 Antons doing that,
Right,
and now there's
right.
so few.
Right.
And there's a reason for that in this society. That those folks don't exist anymore.
Right.
But
Right.
we have artifacts in museums,
Right.
wonderful things. But in terms of teaching and being and the skill and using your hands and making something that your grandmother taught you
How to make.
Come on.
Right. And it becomes generational.
Come
and you're
on.
moving it forward because it's generation. You're keeping
It's
that
it's
DNA story
life-saving.
continuing.
Yes.
So you're kind of on the moderator, but I'm going to add this since we're talking about your hat. I'm going to ask you that same question, Lana.
Anton?
I'm going to ask you that same question.
Well,
Because you seem to have come to be one of the center of conversation here as well. So I'm going to ask you that same
Anton.
question.
no,
Shouldn't have worn that hat, brother. You shouldn't have worn that hat.
Next
That got
time
me
we do a
going.
conversation, I'm going to wear one of my quilts, okay? So,
I appreciate
all right.
it.
So,
Well, well, my story is, I started learning how to make sweetgrass baskets when I was 4 years old. Now, that's what I tell people, but in all actuality, it could really be earlier than that. I just remember being 4 years old when my grandmama would sit in her chair like this, and she would make her basket. And then when the scrap materials fall to the floor, then that's when I dive down and I start practicing, And then, but that's actually how all children learn. All children learn by playing with the scrap materials
Right.
that fell to the floor because, every basket we ever got a grass box, okay? Your grass box got your grass, your meter, all your supplies and stuff. But see, if you a little child, you cannot play up in no adult grass box because that's money. And even back then, a bundle of grass only about $20. That's still been a lot of money for them. But see, a bundle of grass now is $100 because you can't find no grass no more. And even basket weavers today, a lot of them, they don't really have scrap pieces, going to the floor like that because you can't afford to, because you can't find no grass. Okay. Now, my grandmama, she teaching me this, and as I'm growing up, this just became a part of my identity. I grew up in what they call a sweetgrass household. Y'all might be like asking about my accent, but I'm considered Gullah Geechee because I'm from Charleston. But I grew up in North Mount Pleasant, well, what's considered North Mount Pleasant today, thanks to growth or whatnot. But I actually grew up on what used to be a slave plantation. And so all of my ancestors, most of us, like we literally come off of that plantation and we had stayed, and most of us, we sold basket. And then here it is a few hundred years, 100 years later, and some change, and here it is in the 1990s, I jump on my bicycle, I learn how to sew basket with the rest of my first cousins, and, we jump on the bike and we go down the road, and you look in people's yard and you see everybody sewing basket. Everybody under the tree sewing basket, Some people on the porch.
No. What you're saying, I thought it was interesting because before we started, one of the things that you said that I thought stood out was when you were little, you thought everybody made baskets. It was something that was normal. So I thought that was
I literally
interesting.
thought that all African Americans made basket because, like, the majority of the entire African American community in Mount Pleasant make basket, and that's only because as the craft was dying on other South Carolina plantations and Mount Pleasant, back in the 1929, 1929 is when they built that Cooper River Bridge that bring traffic over from downtown Charleston to Mount Pleasant. So here it is. Now we old country people, we got cars zooming down, Highway 17. And so we still a basket making community, but there was no industry yet. So here comes somebody, she said, well, let me put my chair upside the road and see if somebody stop. and buy a basket. And next thing you know, that saved the entire culture, and it gave birth to the industry because it gave rise to the basket stand. So the basket stand popped up in 1930. My grandmama, she had to go to the basket stand. My grandma born in 1940, but she was born, the industry already going on at this time, you know. My great grandmama, she would make all her churn sew basket.
Okay.
'Cause
Well,
they-
I'm going to intersect because he's going back to the 1930s and the 20s. We'll be here for 2 hours. But
you got that right.
but what you're saying is so intertwined to the entire conversation, you know, in terms of your book, Man's Love with Nature, and what you write in terms of Hurricane Katrina. I want to, when the conversations come back to me, it's not just me talking today, but when it comes back, I want to intertwine all of that, your book and your writings, into going back into this whole conversation. So next question, I'm going to zip up for a second. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Renee S. Anderson from the Smithsonian, and I'm excited and happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the welcome.
Yes.
It's great to be
Yes,
here.
yes.
And so, what I would like to ask the panel writ large to share, I would like for you to think of early work that you did and work that you're doing now, and what it took for you to get from point A to where you are now. And then I want you to consider, if you're willing to share with us, if you're going to use the same processes moving forward, or are you going to change or tweak in a way.
You starting off with me?
Well, let's start with Finney, or
Go ahead, Nikki.
We can start with Cookie. You know, like anyone, start whosoever will. Not necessarily the audience, but you know, on the stage here. Because, and I'm sorry, you know, it takes some thought, but what did it take for you to get to here, where you are, what you're doing now, and what do you think, or how do you plan to move forward? Because are you going to do the same thing?
I think Drew should answer that question first, since we are like our critique.
Oh, so Drew, it's been shared that you should answer that first.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a, well, I mean, all of our stories are different, but I, you know, as a scientist, I spent a lot, the first half of my career as an ornithologist. I'm still an ornithologist, but this was pre-Google. Any of y'all can remember Netscape 2.0.
oh wow,
But I bring that up because it's a lot of my work is about identity. And science, at least they would have you believe, is not about identity. So you never write in first person, but you always know who's writing. You know that. But I can remember getting calls on my phone and my voicemail on and I would play the tape and hit the button, and they'd say, "Dr. Lanham, can you come talk to us about bluebirds or whatever?" And I would generally say, yes, I'll come and talk to you about bluebirds. And I would get there, and sometimes I would find myself having to knock on the door to get in the building because they didn't know I was black. So they couldn't Google me,
Right,
right?
right.
And I remember thinking, or being at a professional meeting and people mistaking my graduate students for me. And so for a while, you know, I lived in that. I lived in sort of this anonymity and disrespect of people not recognizing my face, because that was what science was about. And then having a chance to evolve into a writer, for that to come out.
right.
And so the artist's expression grew out of that scientific objectivity and anonymity, and so that's where I am. And so now it feels like this veil. If you think about, you know, Booker T removing that veil, that's sort of what it felt like, or it feels like, to write.
To write, yeah. Can I add to that? and I'm gonna jump in on your comment. I want to add to what you're saying because in Man's Love to Nature, in your writing was that, and it's interesting how you talk about you don't write in as a scientist, you don't write in you document in the first person. Is that what you said?
Never.
Never. But it's interesting in that book, one of the things as I was going through it and finding certain things, I was like, wow, is that you write it from a very introspective perspective. It's very personal in a way than even when I look at a read, and Nikki Finney and I were talking yesterday about Left, this writing that she did, Left. And she writes that for me in looking at the juxtaposition of both of those, because with your writing, in that sense, and I know if I go back and read it again, and maybe that's an argument. One is from a more introspective, so you are able to write it from a point of view that's inside out.
Right.
And with Left, for me, it's very observational. It's external, in that sense, but they are very much. And I think one of the things that I was really trying to do was find this merger that connected the exhibition and your work and Nikki Finney's work, and they're so intertwined in being internal and external, but they're almost saying the same things. They're screaming and they're searching for this race, identity, social issues, and all of those type of things that you're doing it, but just like you're coming from like opposite directions, and I think that's. I just wanted to intersect with that and what you were saying, and this whole idea.
And Drew, your book, The Home Place, was so beautiful and so personal.
Right.
And the way you wrote about the land and what the land gave you to ground you so that you could be where you are. I have a friend who's an ornithologist who's met you. Mm-hmm. And after I read The Home Place, we were talking about the book, and he said, well, what did you think about Drew's book? Mm-hmm. And I said, before I die, I want a man to write me a love letter that sounds like what Drew wrote about the land in Edgefield, South Carolina. It was so, if you have not read
If you haven't
The Home
read it,
Place,
you need to
jot
read
it down,
it.
Get it. It is the most beautiful, wholesome story, and such fierce, brave honesty, and very different, like you said, from your scientific writing where you cannot write in the first person. Mm-hmm. And I love, your grandmother must have just been the most wonderful woman. That is such a tribute to her. And I thank you for that book, because it took me to a new place, even in my work. So mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I mean, to be on, first of all, Home Place, Anton lives that, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And Nikki talks about this place
right.
and coming back. So
right.
I like to say first, as a scientist, if I and I tell my students, first person is the data we know best. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I don't, you venture out on lines, and as a scientist, you talk about confidence intervals, this and that, and you get further and further out here. I can't deal with that. Mm-hmm. I got to be here now, mm-hmm. right? And so part of this, to me, is about urgency. Mm-hmm. So, I'll leave with that, but to be on a convergence, to be on a collision course with Nikki Finney, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. That is, I think it's a fated thing, and to meet Anton and to begin to understand mm-hmm. generations through him. Mm-hmm. So that's home ground for us all. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and your question is really important to me. I've been writing since I was 15, and I'm 65 now, and I'm one of the things that I'm really proud of and really hopeful for is a long writing life. A long life, but a long writing life, especially. I used to say that I don't need knees to write. I don't need to be, some ballerina, if you're a ballerina, you need your knees to do what you need to do. I need a sharp pencil and a piece of paper. And I do need my knees, so I want them to stay with me. But one of the things I'm learning still is that I would not be a writer if I was not still surprising myself as a writer. I'm not interested in writing the same thing I wrote last week or when I was 15 or when I was 35. I'm done with that, and it's still with me, but I'm on to something else. And so what helps me in that department is that I am an ornithologist. I do love bugs. I do love the sky. I was just staring at the sky from this last full moon, and I was making notes outside that I couldn't even read at the moment. I was sharing before we started today, a friend of mine who's an abstract artist was in Atlanta at a lake, and she heard this sound of a man whistling. And she was like, what is that? What is that? And she recorded it and sent it to me because she knows how I would feel about that. She found him, he was walking his dog, but he was whistling. He was whistling in a way that you knew that he knew this song, and he had whistled it 10,000 times. And so I know that whistler is going to make it into something that I'm going to write down the line, because I could tell my, chicken skin. I got it when she sent it to me. And so I was not taught how to write a poem or a book or a novel or a novella. I didn't go to an MFA school, and I could say things about an MFA school that I don't want to say tonight. But I had good English teachers. There were black English teachers in my town before integration came through and obliterated black schools and the power of black teachers. That is where I give my thanks, and that is where I learned grammar and punctuation and how to do a sentence and how to diagram a sentence. And I will forever be glad that they taught me how to write, even though I resist that to this day. But the fact that we have taken handwriting out of our schools, criminal.
Don't get me started.
Don't get me started on that.
Don't get me started.
Criminal, because a young person needs to know. At first I wrote like this, and then I wrote like that, and then I wrote like that, and I finally found what my signature was. And my grandmother said the way you sign that document is the way a doctor signs a prescription. So let people know that's from you. Now, I have young people come up to my table, I'm selling books, they go, oh, you write in cursive.
And you
A
read,
magical lost
and you
art.
read.
Right, but they can't read
They
it.
can't write a letter. They don't know what a heading is. I'm not trying to be an old woman up here with gray hair. I'm trying to say I learned who I was by doing these things, these tactile, hand-driven, handmade things.
Absolutely.
And that is how I approach writing.
Yes.
The way that I approach the next poem I write, or the next story, or the next book, the book that I just finished has letters all in it. Handwritten letters from my father all through my career that I found in a box of 500 letters from him. So in this book, there are little Post-it notes that say, would you be my Valentine? That he wrote from his judicial desk and signed it and dated it. And I put it in here. Why? But to show him he was more than just a judge. He was an amazing father who took care of me and took care of the inside of me. The inside of me. Last story, and I'm going to hush. Daddy would come get me, and we would go through Swan Lake. 20 miles, when you could go through Swan Lake. You can't go through Swan Lake anymore. But he would let me get in the back of his deuce and a quarter window, because that's the only car he ever drove. Black men and Buicks, come on now. And I would get in that back window, and he would say, okay, tell me what you see, baby. What? My father said, tell me what you see, describe it. I said, well, the magnolia blossoms are big, Drew. Or the whippoorwill, or the mourning dove. Daddy, he would say, tell me, go a little closer. That's why I'm a writer. Because somebody in my life took the time to care about what I saw and felt and smelled and cared about that wasn't on a device, because we didn't have devices.
Yes.
Amen.
So my interior, the place that is sensory based, that's where art the touch. I want to touch that. I saw Anton. I wanted to just touch that hat.
I know.
I said,
And
you
I
got
work
to be
in a
careful,
museum,
girl.
I
You
know
can't-
better.
You can't
You don't
do that.
touch stuff.
See, I'm not a museum person. I'm all hands. I don't have white gloves on or anything. That hat sitting like the pork. Come on. I wanted to smell it. Those are so when I have writing students in my class, you know, I bring a bat of strawberries, and they'll say, "Uh-oh, what's she doing today?" I'll cut it. I say, you know how you just eat and you don't smell and you don't take your time? How can you describe that? How can you describe a flock of birds or the red dirt of Edgefield, South Carolina, if you don't taste it? It's not gonna kill you, I promise. But you got to get down in this world that we are leaving so fast, and we are destroying so fast, and you got to take that in your human body so that you can then transform that into something that then I share with this audience.
Thank you. Me?
So,
Share with us.
What did my first works look like compared to where I'm going now? My assistant, who made so much of this possible, just had to leave. So, yay, Maggie, good night. So much of what I did, I started out as a dressmaker. My granddaddy, who was a Baptist minister, gave me 50 cents for my very first Barbie dress I ever made. And I was hooked because I liked quarters. I still like quarters. and I loved the creative process. And I still collect Barbies. But I did a lot of dressmaking for a lot of years, and I was a very good bridal dressmaker. And then Bridezilla started to get on my nerves at the time that my second marriage was kind of falling apart. And I saw someone gave me this book, and it was like, why did you give me this book? The Community of the Spirits by Roland Freeman, which was the study of quilters in all 50 states that he had taken 30 years to create this. And I looked at this book, and it was this revelation. I was like, oh my God, because at first, I have to tell you, I hated quilters. Because I worked in a fabric store part-time, and there would be these little old ladies, and they'd come in the store, and they'd always come right before I had to go to the bathroom or go to lunch or leave, and you had to wait on the customer before you could do any of those things. And they'd have like 30 bolts of fabric, and they'd want like a third of a yard of all of those. And then they wanted to tell me like these boring stories about Sunbonnet Sue, or, you know, I'm making a Baltimore album quilt, or Daisy. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. And those were boring to me, and I had no interest at all. But then I saw this book, Community of the Spirits, and then my mentor, and I will say her name forever, Dr. Marlene Seabrook, Bryant Seabrook, she said, Roland is coming. And I was allowed to work with him, setting up the altar that he sets up whenever he brings a show. It was at the Gibbs Museum in Charleston. I think I saw that show 15 or 20 times, and I was like, I can do this. I have so much to say. Like I said, I'm not a writer. I love writing. I'm sleep with Nikki's books. They're just amazing. But that is not my skill. Fabric is my skill. And so I made my first quilt, and it was really just about rage, because there was, we have a lot of rage that we need to get through. And I was going through personal rage and political rage. And so it was just an ugly, misshapen mess, but it was fine, because I said, okay, I know I can do better, and I can do better. And I'm a deeply spiritual person, and so I talk to God all the time, to the point probably people think I'm schizophrenic or something. But I was talking to God one day, and I said, I really want to make a quilt, but I don't know what to make a quilt about. And I was looking through a book at the same time, and I came upon pictures of the Black Madonna and the Black Holy Family. And I'm a Baptist, so we didn't have that. You know, we talked about the Virgin Mary for about 20 minutes during the Christmas pageant, and then we might, depending on how that Easter was going, we might have mentioned that Mary was at the cross when Jesus was crucified. So I didn't know anything about the Black Virgin Mary. And to see this was like, wow, this is amazing. And the Lord said, make 8 Black Madonnas. And I said, but God, I'm a Baptist. And so I was like, that must have been a message for somebody else. And so but I kept getting the message, and every time I tried to do something other
phone call. All right.
than the Black Madonna, it would not get fixed, or it would get lost, and I was like, okay, I'm giving in. I'm going to do what he asked me to do. So I made the first Black Madonna, and it was good-ish. It was in a quilt show, and I think it was in Charleston. We have a mostly Euro-American quilt guild, and I entered it in the quilt show, and they hung it in the garbage room, and they damaged it. The quilt was 3-dimensional. The Holy Mother had dreadlocks that I crocheted myself, and baby Jesus had little dreadlocks, and the figure of the Black Madonna had breast. Of course, keep in mind these are fabric breast with no nipples. And I had taken a beautiful hand-painted piece of silk and made a 3-dimensional dress that I just tacked on. But of course, this breast was exposed, because those of you who've had children, you know it's very hard to breastfeed through a dress. So the breast was exposed. Someone had taken a giant safety pin and penned over the exposed breast and damaged my quilt. I was furious, but that was such a good thing to have happened, because the very next week there was in Charleston a seminar at the Sophia Institute called the Mosaics of Mary that celebrated the Black Madonna and all the Marys in the Bible. And that quilt, they asked if I would show it there. I ended up selling it for like a lot of money, which is like, yay. And so 2 things happened. I made money, which was really important. And second, they realized I will never enter another quilt show. And thankfully, I had mentors, again, Dr. Seabrook, who said, honey, your work does not need to be in a quilt show. Your work needs to be in a gallery or a museum. And that has been true ever since I made my 3rd quilt. And as I'm going forward, as I am getting older, I'm realizing that, so as you said, young people don't have the interest or even sometimes the ability to do tactile things. So one of the things that I'm doing now is I am writing a series of very simple quilt patterns that you can accomplish. They're called Quilt As You Go. So you will be able to make a quilt in 6 hours to 2 days, and you will leave with a completed quilt so that you will be encouraged to keep going. I want this art to continue. I think that it's very valuable and important for us to do things with our hands. I think we need to do earth-based art. And so that's my mission. I'm continuing. I'm on like Madonna number 5, so I'm still listening to God, and we'll get the other 2 done. But that is my process. I love to do things about nature, doing Black mermaids. Can I talk about Black mermaids for a minute, Dr.
Sure.
In 2012, I did a show about Black mermaids, and it came out of my study of Black Madonnas, and people were like, I've never heard of Black mermaids. And I was like, oh, they hang out with Black Santa in the summertime. But Black mermaids are worshipped as goddesses in certain African religions. And so people were like, I know The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen's like, well, yeah, he kind of stole that information from, you know, our people in Africa. But it was amazing. I had 110 pieces of art, at a gallery in Charleston, right on the water. It was incredibly successful. It was in 2012, and I am bringing it back again this year. In 2023, it will again be in a gallery on the water. Disney is making a live-action Little Mermaid movie, and the actress who plays the Little Mermaid is biracial, and it's causing a lot of controversy. And again, people are going, oh, there's no such thing as black mermaids. But there is a such thing as black mermaids, and they have been worshipped. The worship of black mermaids and water spirits predates the worship of Jesus Christ by about 2,000 years. So we have been, yes, we have been in the building, and it's imperative to me. I'm a mother and now a grandmother. Please ask to see pictures of my granddaughters, they're so cute. But I want them to know that as black women, we are not coming up from slavery. We are coming down from being worshipped as goddesses. And I think you move differently in the world when you know that. And when I went to school, we learned about Phyllis Wheatley, who was a poetess and a slave. And then apparently there were no other black women in history until we got to Harriet Tubman, who ran the Underground Railroad, but she was also a slave. And then because Sojourner Truth was so controversial, there was like a paragraph about her. And then apparently there were no other black women in African American history until we got to Rosa Parks. And that was what you learned about black women in America.
That's more than what I got.
You're a tiny bit older than me.
Well, okay.
But that was it.
I'm like excited that you got that.
And so I want our children to know, and I think it's important for people of all different colors to know that we are whole human beings. And just another really quick story. This last Spoleto in Charleston, it's a really big art show. I Am Omar, an opera, premiered. Rihanna Giddens wrote it, and it's about this Muslim gentleman who was captured and enslaved, and he started writing his autobiography on the walls of his prison cell here in South Carolina. He was sold into South Carolina in slavery. The opera is beautiful, and it will make its debut this fall on Broadway, I believe, isn't it, this fall?
Okay.
I think so. Anyway, but the second scene of the first act, he and several other people are on the slave ship, and they are crying out and singing, "Help me, Umoja, help me, Umoja, save us, Umoja." That is one of the African mermaid water spirits that rescues and saves souls that have drowned in the water. And I was fortunate enough to be at the premiere night, and several people who'd been at the Mermaid Show 12, 13 years ago said, "They were singing about that mermaid you kept telling us about." Yes.
They saw the show.
Something has finally sunk in, and I think, like I said, I think it's important that we can bring these stories to our children, and that is one of the things that I'm doing to move forward, is to try to continue fiber arts in our community. So that was a long answer, and I apologize.
And sir? Antoine, you have 34 years of history of creating art, so.
So I sold my first basket when I was 7. And I sold that basket to an aunt of mine. She came to the house like literally right after I had finished making a basket. And that was the first basket the first basket I made from scratch to completion. And that's like after 3 years of practice, I've been able to get my first basket. Time I finished, my aunt came. I'm so happy to show off my basket. So, I show her the basket. And she said, "Oh, I love this." She said, "Can I give you $5 for it?" I said, "Oh, definitely." So I sell my basket to my aunt, my first basket. But when you grow up learning how to make basket, you also learning the industry at the same time. Like you learning how how to sew. You know, you learning how to sew from day one before you can even stitch. You know, not only is you learning how to sew, but you also learning like where to get materials from. You know, my grandmother, her generation, they used to go to the woods and get their own materials, but you know, here come the 1990s, you know, we got suppliers that came to our house and, you know, be like, hey, I got grass today. Hey, I got meter today. You know, you buy everything you need, sometimes even if you don't need it. You know, it's always good to have extra. So, you know, you sew basket every day. And then once you get your basket together, we had to go to the market. But really, we had to go to the basket stand. We had to go to the hot basket stand during the summertime. No AC. We had to come with a cooler. My grandma, she had all of us. You know, all of us. We pack up under the little basket stand, right off of 17. And them cars zooming going by. You know, you feel the heat. You feel the heat, and. But see, I didn't think anything of it, you know, that's just why, you know, my grandma, she been going to that basket stand since she been a little girl. So here it is now, she in her 50s, she got her grandchildren to the basket stand, and you know, traffic heavy, you know, you get hot, you're ready to eat, you know, but you do gotta bring your lunch and stuff like that, and you know. And sometimes people didn't really stop, you know. I don't really recall us making too much money at the basket stand, even after all of them years. Like we really had to go to the basket stand like just about every day, just to be able to get some. Because sometimes people wouldn't stop, you know. But when they did stop, they did buy.
Anton, can I ask you a question? Do you feel what you are making with Sweetgrass is yours design-wise, it's not a stitch. What do you call it? When you're not the wrap that was passed down to you. But do you think you have taken this very traditional art form and created something of your own path?
Yeah, I
Do you remember that consciously? Like when you started saying, I don't want to make this. I don't want to make a basket. Maybe I want to make a pork pie hat.
Well, you know, it's like I was always learning to challenge myself as an artist, you know, but the medium just happened to be Sweetgrass because that's just what I grew up around. And, you know, but see, once we moved to the market, you know, here it is, I'm like a teenager and, you know, I was branching out and making different styles at about that point because I wanted to challenge myself and make something different from like, you know, a traditional cross handle or like a traditional braid tray. But I make those things because that's what people want, you know, like people want to see them kind of basket. But see, and then what goes in demand changes too, you know, like a classic 1990s ass handle pop in and out of style all the time. And see, when you in the city market, you know, you got hundreds of people going by, so you're able to test the market with the product. And when you see a little $20 twist handle sitting there, you say, well, why a twist handle wouldn't sell? You know, like twist handle ain't sell at all this season. And sometimes that can go on for like 2 or 3 years. And then you gotta say, well, I gotta stop make twist handles, and they probably looking at the cross handle. And you know, when I used to specialize in making souvenir size pieces, I did that for almost 7 years. With just making souvenir size pieces, you know, because I like to see the product be made today and sold today, you know, because I didn't have time to make a $500 basket and let it sit, although I was doing that, and then baskets would sit, you know. But see, most basket weavers, they would sit down and have a table full of $500 basket, maybe one for what, 100. But see, if I got a table full of $30, $40, $50 basket, everything under 100, I'd be down and sell everything that day, make a few $1,000s, you know, and come back about a month, about 6 weeks later or something like that. But you know, but as an artist though, like as for like where I'm at today, it was actually back in 2009 when I had just recently came back to the United States because I was staying in Guatemala for a little while. And I was teaching English down there for a little bit. And not only was I teaching English, but I was teaching British English at that. I was teaching British English at that. So here it is, I'm teaching these kids, and I got to learn something new at the same time too, you know.
So that's the accent that you're hearing. Okay, no.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Now, being that I'm Geechee, I'm bi-dialectal. So
Yes.
that means sometimes I can choose to speak in standard English,
Yes, sir.
or I can choose to speak Geechee.
Yes, sir.
And it's completely up to me and how I want my audience to follow me, because sometimes when I feel like if I'm speaking 100% in standard English, you won't really feel my message. So I have to speak in Geechee sometimes because it's a part of who I am.
Right,
And even as a teacher, even a teacher now, my students, here it is, I had to wake up 5 o'clock in the morning, had to catch the bus from Zone 1 downtown, heading to Zone 10, you know, and I get to school running a little bit late. And some of these days, I did not even feel like speaking in standard English. And I would just start speaking in Geechee. And the churn would look at me and be like, what are you saying, you know? So I had to, also not only was I teaching my kids British English, but I also wanted them to learn American English too. And then I also had to teach them Geechee. And they understood that. They understood that because, I mean, why not? I mean, I am American, so why not, you know, why am I going to dismiss the fact that, you know, I'm a Geechee African American? So I teach them all of that. I teach them all of that. But when I came back to the U.S. in 2009, you've been around the same time right here, and you know, I wanted to go back into the sweetgrass, but I didn't really know like what direction to take. So I just went to the internet, started doing some research, and I went back into restaurant management at the time too. But so I started doing research on sculpture because I knew I wanted to get into sculpture, you know. And then that's when I fell in love with like Gestalt psychology, which is, you know, which is the basis of my work today.
Anton, come on.
And you know, Gestalt psychology is a psychology that, you know, that came out of Germany
Yep.
back in the early 1900s.
Come on, Anton.
And you know, Gestalt psychology is all about shapes. It's all about shapes and, you know, seeing the whole as being completely different from individual pieces of the entire piece. So I feel like, well, you know, this will probably be the greatest challenge in my life, but I think I'm gonna dive into this and see how can I make sculptures with Gestalt psychology. And you know, this is
You know what? Go.
Go,
Just
man, just go.
But you know, it's it's a journey for me because, you know, as I'm learning the science, you know, I'm learning that, okay, here are these Gestalt principles, you know, the principle of similarity, the principle of proximity,
Come on.
the principle of figure ground, all of these principles here that I'm trying to interpret within 3D sculpture. And at some point, you know, I will master most of those Gestalt principles. And as I master each of those Gestalt principles, you know, my work will definitely change over time, and I'll be able to, you know, better interpret my my vision as an artist. And then also as a sweetgrass basket weaver, you know, because there are times when I do have to go back home and sit down and make a bread tray.
Yeah.
Because sometimes my head hurt. And even when I sit down and look at a sculpture, I have to turn that sculpture around. Because sometimes it'd be too much. And you know, a piece can take like about half a year, sometimes several years.
Can I intersect in that where you are right now too? Because I want to add something. As you brought up something, I want to extract something from what you said and kind of throw it at the group, if I can. Because all of this conversation and what you're talking about, it's really inspirational. And you said something, Dr. Lanham, a while back that talked about this dandelion. And I know we had talked about earlier, I talked about the sculpture piece that I was creating that broke. And you also mentioned something else that stuck in my head, that on this past summer, I had a cicada that crawled onto the back of my door. And the back of it split and it crawled out and it flew away. But I will not move the cicada shell that's on my door. I will not move it. Because it's such a reminder that whatever this is continues. There is something else beyond this shell in this sense. But there was something that was in all of these conversations and what you're talking about, there's something that is rejuvenating, inspiring, and all of those type of things. And I'm thinking about for myself in experiences of the past that forged today and tomorrow and this type of thing with different people. In my own life as writers that I have worked with and stuff like Lucille Clifton, I talked about people like Faith Ringo, Joffrey Holder. I worked at the Dance Theater of Harlem and worked with all these groups that actually have fused to become what I do today and how I talk and how I experience those things. So what I would like to throw at this group, and I say to Nikki Finney and Dr. Lanham first, is when you think about your experiences and people, who are those people? Who are those people that you can talk about that without your work would probably be different, or it would be something else, or that type of thing, if that makes sense. If you can think about that, who would that?
First person off my top of my head would be Tony K. Bambara. I went to Talladega College, HBCU. We didn't have creative writing classes.
Right.
We had great English classes. We had great literature classes, but we couldn't afford to have creative writing classes.
Right.
And I love what I learned in those classes, and then I went to Atlanta, and Tony K. Bambara, who is a great American short story writer, held creative writing classes in her house every Sunday.
Okay. Wow.
So I would go to sit on the floor and listen to her talk about language and writing.
Okay.
But this was the day that changed my life. She didn't drive, she didn't have a car. I had a little Volkswagen Rabbit. We were walking down the street to get in my Rabbit, to take her to the store. This bus driver pulls over, he gets out, he comes up to her. She had just been in the newspaper because of her writing. And I thought he had some papers in his hand, and I thought he wanted her autograph,
Right.
And he said, are you that writer lady? And she said, yes, I'm that writer lady. I was like, oh, here we go. He wants to assign something. He said, well, I'm a bus driver, and I don't read so well, and I don't write so well, but my wife and I want to buy a house. And these are the papers for that house. And we were wondering, would you help us fill these out? You say you're a writer.
Wow.
You say you're a writer, right?
Right.
Do you write? Could you write something on here so we could get this house? She said, come to my house Saturday at 4 o'clock. We'll sit down. We'll fill out that paperwork. And we'll get you that house. He got that house.
Wow. That's
let
a
me
hand clap. Wow.
But, I mean, yes, the story needs applause, but what it did for me as a writer, what made me understand that you need to be in the community.
Yes.
You need to be functioning, not on a hill far away. You need to be doing something, modeling something that some young person needs to watch you do, because that's how we do it. And so if she could help him, as she was the writer, all the glory was coming. She's a fantastic, beautiful writer, but he needed a house. So while we are talking about art and its beauty and its wonder and supporting it, let us also teach young people functioning.
Functioning.
How to also help somebody who's not an artist that you can be connected with. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that moment, because my understanding of who a writer should be. Must be got stamped in that moment.
Yeah, and that applies to the art. And I say this because as we all are artists, so you talk about it from that perspective. But I believe that relates to all areas. It should.
Oh.
It should be an action in what we do in transforming lives.
In many
some way, shape, or
cultures,
form.
the artist is consulted before the money is on the table.
It's the healer. It's the healer.
Before the politics are discussed.
Yes,
The
yes.
artist comes forward and says, can you bless this place? Can you do
Right.
something? Can you create something?
Right.
Not so much in Western culture.
It's not, no.
Western culture, we have art over to the side. We, it's an exclusivity, only
a picture
certain
on the
people
wall.
can make
Right,
art. Only
right.
certain people can be called artists.
Yes.
Only certain people can perform in a place, like a black box. That's not what happens across the globe.
Exactly. Right.
Artistic people
Right.
come for, the storyteller, right?
Right.
The people who keep the history of a community. Those are the artists. There's no disconnect.
Disconnect. Right.
And we have to work harder at not having that disconnect. Don't treat me like I'm special.
Right.
Treat me like you need what I have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Need to write that down. Okay. Wonderful. Yes.
I mean, it's all of us weaving baskets
Come on,
in a
Drew.
way, right?
Come on, Drew.
And what we carry in those baskets, we make specifically, but then those baskets have to serve several purposes. I mean, I think about, for me, that person, my grandmother, Mamatha, who was this mystic, very religious, time-leaping woman.
Right.
So to have her, I mean, I learned to read out of Revelation.
Come on.
So
Come on
some
now.
people would have problems with that. But that's where I learned. But on the one hand, she's teaching me to read out of Revelations. On the other hand, she's throwing grits out to sparrows. And then she's talking to all this parade of people going on at night. And so that, being in that space with her and understanding sort of this, I mean, what's the word now? Intersectionality. She lived it. And I lived it. I lived at that boundary. So when we talk about edges, and as a writer, I feel like she sort of instilled in me this urgency. Because the world was ending every day. There were signs all the time.
That's right, Drew.
There were signs
That's right.
all the time
That's
of
right.
this or that and things I could not do.
Yes.
That pork pie, better not put it on a bed.
Ooh,
Better not sweep trash out the door after dusk.
that's right.
Don't step over a broom
Come
handle.
on, come
Certainly
on.
don't step over anybody laying in the floor.
Come on.
Right.
Don't put your pocketbook on the floor.
Because that's the way you lose your money.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
So all of that, those intersections that the science tried to beat out of me. I call owls, right?
Right.
But my grandmother wouldn't have had that. So, but if I'm going to imitate an owl, I have to ask her first now, even now.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Do you have conversations with her?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right.
And understand, and I've seen her since. I mean, I was in that house. I didn't recognize that the house that I grew up in, essentially, and it's still standing, and something is keeping that house standing, even as my parents' more modern house is being consumed by forest.
Right.
Succession. Her house stands.
Okay. All right.
And I'm in that house, and as a kid, and everything has shrunk now to my dimension.
Right,
I'm a
right.
giant in this house.
Right.
And everything in the house was painted blue.
Right.
Everything.
Your grandmother's house was all painted
grandmother's
blue
house.
in the inside. Okay.
And I'm in there doing my thing, and because I had gone down there to collect some bulbs, snowdrops,
Come on.
that she probably planted back early 1900s. So, and I'm looking at one of these pictures, And here in the corner, there she is, arms folded, just clear as day. People say, well, you can't believe that. You're a scientist. You can't. Yeah, I can. Because I could see and I could feel that. And so that intersectionality has never left. Right. And so that root of her influence on me. And so no matter who I learn from, and I tell my students and other writers, and we talk.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as I talk to other writers not like me, and I ask the question of what are you writing about? What's the urgency?
Right.
I say, well, I don't have an urgency. I just write. Well, I got urgencies. Right. And I think we have urgencies, and that basket that you make to carry something in it, it may be because I couldn't buy a basket. I got to make a basket.
Right.
Or I got to use a jug and cut off the top of it and put in what I need to put in. So as a writer, I see that design of my grandmother's intersectionality and all that she taught me that I sort of ran away from.
Right.
Ran into.
It's a
I ran
boomerang, though.
into.
Yeah.
And so it's constantly in this space with me. And so no matter who it is that I read or who it is that influences me, you know, she's there standing with her arms folded.
Yes, sir.
Right. But you know, it's interesting because I like what you said about this urgency. Because when I look at urgency, I did this talk a couple of weeks ago on the works of Elizabeth Catlett, and I like talking about her as being born in 1915, but I like talking about her before that time. And I bring that same kind of idea here because I talk about this encoded DNA, you know. And it's that urgency that was there in your grandmother. And it was that urgency that was encoded in your grandmother's mother and her grandparents and the ancestors, that all of them had that urgency. So the fact that you make these baskets out of this urgency unknowingly, it's there. I don't know why, I just do this. The fact that you write in that way and Nikki Finney writes in that way, and she's expressing, and we had this conversation as though, I'm like, were you there? It was like yesterday when you were talking, the way that you write about Hurricane Katrina. I was like, were you there? Were you there? Because it's so real, but it's that urgency that all of us have encoded in our DNA to express. And though the ancestors are not physically here anymore, we are entrusted to say and do what they have to do.
See, I think they're here.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But that's what I'm. I believe that as well, and I have the same experiences you have. You know, but that'll be a whole nother conversation, whole nother lecture. But I say their physical existence is not here. Right. But the urgency for us the urgency of what they have to do and to say and do continues, and it continues through it is manifested through what we do. And I see that greatly through both of your works. And you became the muse for the conversation today with your hat. And it is so present in your hat. It is so present in what Cookie does, and all of this work. And that kind of leans on this to extend that whole conversation to I'm gonna jump back to you, Nikki, again, to kind of expand on that whole concept and that idea a little bit more.
Actually,
Go
I have a
Go
question
ahead.
that I want to ask.
Yes.
And I'm sure that people ask you, creative folks, all the time. And what I want to know is what keeps you up at night about your art.
Right.
But I also want to know, how can we help you sleep better at night? We always want to dig and pull apart our artists, but how many of us volunteer to help and to support? So what's keeping you up at night about your art, and how can we help you?
Wow.
I'm sorry. Because see, when I make people cry, I know my job is done. I'm good. You know.
I just want to say, what keeps me up at night is what I'm working on. That's what keeps me up at night. What would be helpful is if people in the community did not fear mixing grandmama's how to make a hat with Gestalt. if we could, if teachers, if people in positions of influence and power did not fear what they did not perhaps understand, right, in one part of their brain, but can see as a generative force in the world. Don't take away my handwriting. Don't take away me putting science with astrology, with how my hand moves across. Don't call me an odd person. Don't think of me as on the fringes of society. Think of me as the center of this society. All of us can do a better job of not relegating creative minds and hearts who are struggling to figure out where to go in this life to over there. We have to bring them in. We have to see them. We have to not the people on the stage can't model everything that needs to be modeled. There are other people who really need to be embraced and not laughed at and not relegated to a position in the room that's
In the corners.
A social centerpiece, there for your entertainment, not for you to love and support, but for you to entertain us. I'm sorry.
You took it. That's what I'm saying. You asked me the question, and that's the part that as I've been teaching in the academy for 33 years. I've been teaching other ways 35 or 36 years. Young people need us, people of all ages need us to not have one way to be successful in this life.
Yeah, right.
One, we all need money, right? But we need right now, this planet Earth needs us to help it because we got 8 billion people now and we don't have fireflies. We don't have frogs on a country road. Intersectionality, we need all of that to be human.
I haven't heard a whippoorwill since I was 8 years
Why
old.
don't we
and
talk
I'm
about that?
62. And my husband doesn't even know what the sound of a whippoorwill is.
Well, see, that's the urgency, right?
That's the urgency.
I mean, that keeps me up,
Yeah.
and keeps me writing to the next thing. I mean, because it, again, the world, and all those prophecies,
Right.
all those prophecies that, Well, hey,
Yeah.
you can line them out, and I'm not trying to be weird here, but she was right. God sent Noah the rainbow sign saying, "Won't be water but fire next time. We burn it up." Believe that.
Wow.
Believe that, right? And so, call it climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. Whippoorwills not singing, birds changing their ranges. All of these things, and what we hear, what we don't hear, what we see, what we don't see, and not knowing whether it is reality, right? That's something that's virtually presented. You better be urgent about figuring that out. So as artists, whether we are sculpting or weaving or writing or singing or quilting or whatever it is that we're doing, I think we owe the art an urgency.
Absolutely.
And in that urgency, maybe others then begin to see, oh, wow.
Right.
Because urgency is wanting to touch something. And not saying, well, I'll just look at it through the VR, I don't need to touch it.
Right.
So that keeps me up. It wakes me, really. I fall asleep like, nothing, but I wake up quick.
Yeah.
So I think, that to the point of what keeps us up, what sort of drives that, for me, it's that urgency, because next moment's not promised.
And we're running out of resources. My friend Georgette Sanders, who is in the show, who creates beautiful sweetgrass with raku pottery, we've had many conversations about the fact that it's harder and harder to find sweetgrass. And it's harder and harder for a lot of us to find the things that we use to create our art. And that keeps me up at night, is worrying about that. And what would help me as an artist would be what helps me as a human, as a mother and a grandmother. Save this planet. Respect Mother Earth. Please make sure that the next generation has some sweet grass so that Anton can keep, has some cotton so I can make cotton batting and teach that to my granddaughters like my grandmother taught me and my great-grandmother taught me. We're abusing the earth, and we have to cut that out. We have got, maybe as artists, we're on the leading edge of saying, look, this is what's happening, and we have to tell the truth and shame the devil. It's time, it's past time for us to pay attention and to give not lip service, but real service to preserving our stories, our planet, our artists. We have to preserve everything, and that I would love you to speak to your work as a preservationist and how you come in the world in your occupation, because I think what you do is so important and valuable, and I'm so glad that you're here. And I wish you would share that with us.
I have the joy and the privilege of working in my dream job. I work for the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. It is the 19th museum that was created by the Smithsonian Institution. And working with collections, because I have what we like to say is nose trouble, I'm nosy. I want to know about what this is. I want to know why this is a major contribution to history. I want to know your story. I want to know why you made what you made, why you kept what you kept, why you wrote what you wrote. I want to know. I want to know how you think. And then I get the joy of helping to protect anything that comes to the Smithsonian. Is called, it is designated as a national treasure. We're required to take care of it into perpetuity. We cannot destroy it. We must do our best to preserve it for generation after generation, to be able to have the blessing of interacting with that object and understanding that object and the history and the story behind it. So I am always happy to have conversations and dialogues. I had the joy of working with Dr. Gladys Marie Fry. And so when her quilt collection, she was considering it coming to the museum, I got the joy of interviewing her and asking her about it. When we found out about a black milliner in Philadelphia, May Reeves, Lula May Reeves, she opened her own business. She got her own loan in 1947 without a male having to co-sign. The woman was 98 when I met her, and she remembered the first hat she ever made. And I got the joy of interacting with her and talking with her and learning about that. And so in terms of what we have, what's part of our history, all history, how do we keep those things, preserve those things? And we are required. I mean, there are things we can do and things we cannot do at the museum. There are, ways that we handle, ways that we work. We're looking at working and maintaining and preserving objects in a green way through sustainability. So we are moving away from using the harsh chemicals that we use to protect and to do things like that. So, we're looking at it overall writ large. Secretary Lonnie G. Bunch III was my boss. He was the founding director for that museum, and at some point I reported directly to him, and it was kind of like, okay, Lonnie, what do you want? And how do I give you the desires of your heart while I'm compliant with all that I'm required to do because I'm a federal entity? So I want to know, I want to see your art. I want your art preserved, but I want your stories preserved too. I don't want someone who never knew you or even valued you to have the responsibility of talking about you and your art and your creativity, how you got from here to there, why your work changed from here to here, because people don't always get it right. And what's difficult is that we don't have a lot of people that look like us that are working in the museum world talking about preserving and interpreting our objects. So when I'm having to explain to someone about a theater costume, and I said, well, I did costumes for community theater. Mm-hmm. What you're looking at is standard theater makeup, but under that you got a layer of lotion. Because my grandmother said, you don't go out of here looking like an ash cat kitten. I don't know what that meant, but then she slathered us down in Vaseline. So we were shiny, you know, and they did all these scientific tests on that. And I'm like, they're like, it's got a low melting point. I'm like, I told you what it was. It's lotion. Because we in our community, we will wear lotion. We will put that on. So who is interpreting what we have that's left behind? Mm. Are there special considerations? Always, for anything and everything. And it's difficult. People like to put things in boxes and line everything up. But we're all individuals. We look at it, we interpret. We've been indoctrinated, impressed, created, educated, and diseducated and disrespected individually.
And appropriated.
Well, yeah.
Well, true.
Well, I can't talk about that yet. But, you know, so I have that privilege and I have that joy, and I was so passionate about it. I spoke to Claudine Brown when it was the African American Museum Project, and went back to graduate school and acquired over $80,000 worth of debt. No, I became a doctor, but, you know, not a sick doctor, just a smart doctor. So I could work at that museum. And I'm thrilled and I'm honored to be able to do that and to also do tours. So when people come, you know, if there's a tour, I'm like, I'm happy to take that tour on and take that group through and talk to them and share information, you know, how we acquired something and how long it took us to acquire it and what we did to bring it in. We always want people to be comfortable with the decision they make. And we always want to be honorable and respectful of their stories. Not my story, it's their story. Not their treasure. It's a treasure now for everybody. So I love what I get to do. I'm excited about what I get to do. And I love talking to people, especially creative people. Because see, I learned to sew at my grandmother's feet when I was 4 years old. Literally, my sister and I, because we played under her sewing table while she was sewing. So now I've got 3 grandchildren that want to learn to sew and a great niece that wants to learn to sew. So I'm like, okay. Yeah, that's a blanket on the wall that I made, but it's actually called a quilt. Yes, I'll make you one, but you're going to come with me and learn how to do it, because I need to teach additional generations. I need to talk to other groups and let them know, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. Would you like to learn? I'm happy to share. And working with other communities, our Asian American sisters and brothers, our Native American sisters and brothers, because there's a lot of disrespect that's gone around for a long time.
Thank you.
But then we didn't hear from Antoine down there. Yes. Oh, question?
It's approaching 8.
Yes. Yes.
Do we want to,
Wrap this up?
We,
wrap
We're close.
up, and maybe, I don't know if the audience has questions, or, but if you want to.
Okay, we can do the wrap.
Make closing statements.
Antoine didn't tell
Closing
us
statement.
what keeps him up at night and how we help him.
Keep you up, right?
Time, you know, creating inventory, creating what's in demand, and then also trying to find the time to create sculptures. And then especially when I know I got my first solo exhibit coming up next year, and thank you. And I try to figure out now where the time will come from, because I have to make a sacrifice. You know, and I trying to put together now where the sacrifice going to come in at. And it may have to be just balancing how much inventory I produce, and maybe even living off of less money, which is not something that I would like to do. But I mean, I know we were talking about like what's urgent in terms of urgency, the sweetgrass, and then that's hard to find right there. At every basket weaver, we do have, our own stash, and, and the grass can literally last for years. But at some point, that's going to run out. And then when that do run out, we have to find a supplier to go into the fields and bring the grasses back. And they're not really doing that anymore, because there's really nowhere to go. And the only place that they are going now is out in Savannah. There's a plantation out in Savannah that the suppliers still go to, bring the materials back to Charleston. But like, they're risking their life by, sneaking on private property. And that's where we are today in order to bring grass back into town. 90% of all the baskets, sweetgrass baskets, are made in Mount Pleasant, but 90% of all the grasses are being imported in, and not even anywhere local, but from a whole nother state. And that's just to try to keep the industry growing. So, not to say, but we do have sweetgrass that is being grown like throughout the Low Country, and that was thanks to the research that was done at Clemson, which proved that the plant can actually grow outside of its natural environment. But the plant isn't as flexible as what we need and desire from modern basketry. So we still have the issue where we got planted grass that's for us to pull, but it's not desirable. So also thinking about those changes, like, what would my work look like in the future? How can I continue this path of exploration when sweetgrass grade A sweetgrass, I would say, is actually becoming hard to find and hard to bring into town. So what's grown around the Low Country, this grade B, who do I go to and find out who owns this property? Can I pull this sweetgrass? And then once I get that sweetgrass, I got to get used to working with it. And it's just like working with bulrush, and those are materials I never liked to work with. I always chose to work with just grade A sweetgrass, and I didn't even use much pine straw either. So, there are a whole multitude of challenges, that I'm facing. And then also I just continue to be optimistic, and, I'm thankful for the grass that I do have, so that I don't have to actually go out to any supplier and be like, hey, when are you going to go and get grass again? Because at one point it was never like that, So, but yeah, I mean, it's, but where do we go from here, I would say we have to find a way to make the grade B, which is being grown around the Low Country, work.
And actually, that was you just wove a great segue into salutation, the closing. Where do we go from here? You just answered it, so we can go all the way down the line. And I talked about, we began that way, we'll end that way. And as we move into that way, I just want to say that this has been great. I know we've gone over time, but we could actually go 2 more hours in having a conversation with all of you about what you do and how you do and why. I found it so inspirational. And motivational, so I'm going to write. That's what I'm going to do that, all right?
I thought we were getting a quiz.
No.
You're going to write, okay. You're going to write on the quiz?
I will write on it.
Okay.
But I'll start with you. We'll begin we'll close how we began.
I'll start with Cookie.
Where do we go from here? I'll start with Dr. Lana.
I'm going to share a little piece, okay?
Okay, all right.
All that we carry. This is incomplete. This kept me up a little bit. All that we carry, for Nikki Finney, who carries so much for us in her words. All that we carry, in gourds grown strong along rivers we cannot remember, in wooden Sinufo bowls on a mama's head, in memories of her sons who never returned, in prayers in goatskin bags, in our seasick middle passaged bellies retched out in the dark below, In gourds grown along strange rivers become familiar, in wooden gullah bowls on a mama's head, in memories of her son who never returned. In burlap sacks dragged along long cotton rows, in jugs of Edgefield clay, name scribed in stoneware, rules to not read or write ignored for the sake of freeing self. In willow creels full of mullet fish, head on, not split. In sweetgrass baskets from marsh at low tide, winnowing rice in the breeze, in cast nets thrown from clenched teeth, snaggled, wriggling full of shrimp in prayers, in leather satchels with notes to pass from this plantation to that, in raggedy bundles tied to hard hickory hoe handles when Harriet came up the Cumbie, in tin tubs full of Jubilee neck bones, in cast iron pots too heavy to move, in wrapped up quilts patched together from precious scraps. In pokes and grips migrating to Detroit, maybe DC, in secondhand suitcases to Fisk or Talladega, in greasy brown paper bags taken from side windows way round back, in open caskets, in memories of sons who never returned, in prayers, in lunch pails to the march, in purses refusing to sit in the back, in pockets turned inside out on a legal search, in skulls no longer fondled for what they called science, carrying ideas to make a nation rich. In wounded hearts asked again and again to be the better person with knees on our necks, in laptop satchels carrying uneven red line chances, in bank accounts with pennies on the white dollar, in dreams interrupted by death being black, in memories of sons who never returned. In spite of all this, we carry you, America, still, clinging to our backs in prayers for our mothers, for our fathers, for our sons, for our daughters, for our others. We remember and we carry all that we carry.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Good. Okay. I'm about to tear. Can you see this? Okay.
I just wish we had more conversation. I feel you thinking and feeling and wanting to say things, and I hate for us to leave without that.
Without conversation?
Because we're up here on this stage, but you're on a stage too. And somebody out there knows somebody who could grow some sweet grass for Anton. I know that. That's how has to work, or this is not going to work. So I'm just saying, your power is not in your silent place in the seat. Your power is when you leave here and what you do with what you heard, and helping some artist or doing something that you think that you can't do, that you can do. That's how we continue to do what we do, but that's how this becomes humanity and not just the folks who listen to the artist tonight. It's like we need you we need your power to do what you do, whatever you do, and however you do it. We don't do this by ourselves. We do this connected to our community. And so you came out here to listen to all this talk, all this 10 hours of talking we did. So don't just leave with your ears full. Realize that we need you to be active and vibrant and raising your hand, especially at this time when the arts are so under attack, especially at this time when the truth is so under attack. People just want to win. They want to win a party, they want to win a contest, but they don't want to have conversations. And that's what we had tonight. And I know you were speaking to us because I could feel it, even though I haven't heard those words specifically.
And that, people, is why she is Nikki Finney. Thank you. Yes. Well said. Yes.
Do we have time for two questions? It's 8:05. We're way over.
We're way over.
We're way over.
Is everybody okay?
You open that pot.
Okay. All right, then never mind.
Shirley has a question.
Or maybe somebody could be, instead of Anton trying to find him because he's got a show to do.
I was like, yeah,
you know
he's
what I
got a
mean?
show.
Like somebody could help make that connection. That's what I'm saying.
Area in King Comer.
Okay.
Yeah. And connecting these quail people to sweetgrass, because quail love sweetgrass.
Yes.
Huh,
And it's
okay.
a lot of money in those birds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
what I'm
All
talking
over these
about.
plantations.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that bird whistling means sweetgrass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shirley.
Thank you.
So what would your strategies be, because there are a lot of old heads, white hair, what are your strategies for younger people to take up these legacies? Because everyone talks about a grandmother or someone in your past who took the time to do what, how can these conversations be communications for this next generation, the Gen Z generation, who get access to make the connection between the scholars and grandmas and then personal.
That's a poem, baby, right there. I'm telling you. Well, what my strategy is, we just opened the Ernest A. Finney Jr. Cultural Arts Center in Columbia, South Carolina. One of the, I am not a director, but I am the director. I'm the poet-director. I feel the necessity of what we talked about today, making some real strong attempt to bring some people, young people into that space and to be model what we do and let them see that. It's not that young people don't want to do things with their hands. That's not the point. The point is people stop teaching young people how to do things with their hands.
Right.
They love their hands. They want to make things with their hands, but nobody thinks that's a valuable thing, so they don't teach young people. They're hungry to know how to do something with their hands, and then they want an older person to say, hey, you can do something with that. But don't take away that skill, don't not teach them that skill and make them totally looking at that device. So one of the things we're gonna do is hands-on. We had this brother come in who used to teach leather arts at the high school. He said, I wanna teach a workshop to the young people who don't have anything to do but look at that device. I want to teach them how to work with leather. Another brother worked with Philip Simmons down in Charleston, said, I did ironworking. Can I do ironworking in the parking lot? I might never go back to USC and teach. That's not the plan. I plan to only be away for a year and a half. I can't keep a secret, but
All right.
if this goes well, who knows?
Yeah, we have a question.
I just want to say that to address the issue of not having enough sweetgrass, and I know down in Beaufort, I have friends and family who live in Beaufort. They used to be able to go outside in the backyard and get shrimp and crabs and all of those seafoods. Then the government came in, and I'm saying that a lot of problems come with zoning, legislation,
Redlining.
and the politicians, people that we elect to protect us, and have people putting in place laws to exclude the people from using the resources to live by. The wheatgrass, the shrimps, and all that. So I'm saying that we need to look at the basic foundation, and that's government. And how those laws are made and designed to exclude the people from making a living and using the resources. And Charleston, Beaufort, that whole area is now a resort area. It's all being sold to private people, and I drive through there, and you have all this swampland, and I know sweetgrass is grown in that area, but like you say, it's private, and you can't go on the land to get the sweetgrass. So I think we need to address the issue on basic level, which is legislation and getting people in there to advocate for
Advocate for that, right?
That's
I'll say from, and South Carolina is
Yes,
known for
okay.
conservation. And thank you for those statements. And people ask the question, and I always say, well, why don't we see black people out in nature doing? But I said, well, you're not looking really, because all you got to do, especially in the low countries driving, you see people fishing, but guess what? I didn't grow up with catch and release fishing unless it was catch and release in a pan of grease.
Hey,
Right? And so
Dinner.
to be sustained through nature as opposed to the idea of nature as recreation in the way that you see it. So you linearize me out of it to protect it. All right? So that's just another sort of gentrification, quite honestly. And so we have to speak of gentrification not just as houses going up in places where we used to be, but also in those places where people hunted, right? Where people fished, where people were fishing and enjoying it, but they were taking dinner home. So those are issues of legislation, and you see them, all you got to do is sit in one Senate hearing. And that is the way that land is taken first. You know, that those foodstuffs are removed. So when we think about sweetgrass and we think about shrimp and we think about how people are making a living on the water and on the land, that is the basis, and we have to pay attention to what they're telling us from a conservation perspective and where we can go and where we can't go and where. So the idea of eco reparations is something I want y'all to pay attention to.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You know, and as people come and build industry on land and take the best land and give you
Right.
junk elsewhere, there's got to be a price that's paid in greenbacks. And I'm not talking about dollars. I am talking about dollars, but I'm also talking about sustainable industry, endowed education. You mean tell me you can make billions of dollars here in the state, not pay taxes, and you cannot have endowed scholarships for people from those communities that you displaced? That's a legislative issue.
Yep.
Questions? Anybody else?
And there was one other question over here, the blue shirt. I saw your hand up just a few minutes ago. We'll end with you, I guess.
I just wanted to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you make those, do you have various designs for the catalog?
Catalog.
So right now, you can go to my Facebook community page, and that's facebook.com /Grass in Motion. And I have designs, pictures on there from maybe like the past 15 years. Now, my website is also called Grass in Motion, grassinmotion.com, and sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. But, in all actuality, it don't stay down long enough. But I have been quite an enigma, but, people who do reach out to me, who want to find me, they are always able to find me. But to stay in touch with me, you should go straight to my Facebook page. Yeah.
but note that he is getting
Be
ready for a
patient.
show.
Well, I can actually take orders this year, and then it would also depend on whether or not a customer is looking for something more modern and sculptural, or if they're looking for something simple and traditional. Anything that's more modern and sculptural, that's starting at about 5,000 on up. Those pieces I would prefer that the art collector buys them under contract, so that they can be placed in my exhibit for next year, and then so that it can travel as well, moving forward. So, it is a possibility that they may not see that piece for 6 years, because it'll be on the road, and that's part of the attention. But as it's on the road, it is, those pieces are expected to increase in value. So,
So smart.
so as for selling any type of sculpture in 2023, I would kind of like that to be my my standard. If they're going to be serious enough to want to purchase any of my sculptures ahead of display time.
So direct. Any other questions?
I love it.
Good thought. This gentleman right here?
Oh, gosh.
Deep.
I am already teaching my granddaughter. My oldest granddaughter is 4, and she loves to come in the studio. She has a little basket, and she picks up all the scraps, and then she puts the colors in the piles, and so I'm moving her towards getting on the sewing machine before the end of the year. So yeah, I think it's
Continued
imperative
legacy.
that she do that. And her baby sister, who's 7 months old, it's right behind her. And the other one is in Virginia, and when she's home for the summer, got it.
I'm teaching fabric, creativity, nurturing that, and I will be teaching the 2 granddaughters to sew, and the grandsons if they express an interest, or when they do, and 2 great nieces. It's not that my grandmother didn't teach all of the women in the family to sew, all the girls in the family to sew. I'm the only one that stuck with it. I have 3 degrees based on fashion and clothing and textiles. So tag, it's me.
There you go.
Yeah. Well,
Anyone else?
with that said,
You're welcome.
thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. All right.